make that go back out of screen. Okay, so I'm Andy Miller. I'm a professor here in the Department of Geography and Environmental Systems, and I am responsible for organizing our department seminar series. So in a moment, I will introduce our speaker. First, I've just got to mention two upcoming events, one of which I was asked to announce that's this Friday, and that is a visit from NASA headquarters. This is a visit by Jack Kay, who's Associate Director for Research, NASA Headquarters Earth Science Division, and he's Associate Director for Research in the Earth Science Division, Dr. Charles Ikchoku, who's in our department and is Director of the Guest Star 2 Center, asked me to make this announcement. This will take place, there's a welcome event at 10:30 p.m., so 10:30, I think that's a.m. And then at noon, the seminar will be on NASA Earth Science missions and programs. That will be in the physics building in room 401. The other thing I wanted to mention is our own seminar coming up next week, which will be with Rona Cobell, who is a journalist and a film and radio producer, entrepreneur, and sometime professor. She will be here next week, and she's going to be talking on this topic, which is the subject of her book that she's working on right now, What Harriet Left Behind, Rural Redlining and Rising Seas on Maryland's Eastern Shore. The film that she co-produced, Eroding History, will actually be shown the next day on campus. So when this announcement goes out, we'll give the information about those, so for both of those events. Okay, so back to our today's speaker. Well, it's not on the screen yet, just a second. Good. So Dr. Tess Thompson joins us from Virginia Tech, where she's currently an associate professor in the Department of Biological Systems Engineering. She has degrees in agricultural, civil, and biological systems engineering, worked as an engineer in state government and private consulting. Her research in stream and wetland restoration focuses on the role of vegetation in flow resistance and stream bank erosion, mitigating the impacts of urban development on stream systems, and predicting the onset and rate of stream bank fluvial erosion. Dr. Thompson currently serves on the Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee for the Chesapeake Bay Program. And I'll just let you know, we're going to have to leave right after the seminar is over, because Tess and I and her PhD student, Malia, actually have a meeting in Towson with the county's Department of Environmental Protection and Sustainability to talk about Mine Bank Run, where some of this work is going on. So you get a chance to ask some questions at the end, and then we're going to actually have to vanish, unlike the way we normally do things. So Tess, welcome. I'll stay here until we make sure you've got everything working, but I think should all be fine now.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Andy. And thank you for inviting me. Let's see.
You just hit, yeah, just the right arrow should advance it.
Okay. So first of all, I want to acknowledge my project partners. Dr. Miller is one of them. David Sample is our stormwater specialist. Mohammed Osmani did some work building the swim model I'm going to talk about. Sami Tausif Khan is the PhD student who's wrapping all of this work up. And so he's responsible for the bulk of this research that I'm going to show you. And then Mina Shahed Darus and Andrew Miller. And then the climate change part of this we worked on with Tetra Tech. And so John Butcher was the main person there. And of course, I need to also recognize our funding sources, which is the Chesapeake Bay Trust is the main group, but there are multiple folks contributing to that. The US EPA was the primary funder for this project. And I also want to give a huge shout out to Montgomery County, Maryland, and the USGS for having the foresight to many years ago, almost 20 years ago, invest in monitoring in this watershed. And without that, we wouldn't have been able to do this project. Okay, so I didn't warn the students here, but this is an interactive presentation. So who knows what this is? You'll see these all everywhere. Any guesses? There are no points off, so you can always check. Yeah.
A pathway for stormwater?
It is a pathway for stormwater. It's also, not only does it permit the movement of water, but what else does it do to the stormwater?
Infiltration.
A little bit of infiltration. That's not its primary purpose.
Look at the shape.
Yeah.
of the land surface.
Definitely slow down the flow. Okay, so we would call this a dry detention basin. So it slows down the flow. It's basically a giant grass bowl with a concrete, what as an engineer, we would call an outlet structure. Do this with the mouse.
If you just hit this here,
Well, but I'm thinking the folks online won't be able to see the pointer. So it's
well,
gonna-
you can use this you can use the mouse to
Okay.
point to things, but if you want to advance the slides, that you can use that.
Okay, well, got it. So this is what we call an outlet structure, and it's designed to allow a certain flow rate as the water rises. And so as the water gets deeper, there's a greater flow rate. It actually falls over the top of this kind of open pipe. Okay, we'll come back to this, but kind of my point is stormwater management is spread throughout the landscape, but we typically don't realize what we're seeing unless you've had a stormwater class and you know what you're looking for. And stormwater management is incredibly important. Okay, we use it to mitigate both the water quality and the water quantity impacts of urban development, of changing the landscape from poor soil and forest to impervious surfaces. If you don't have good stormwater management, or frequently any stormwater management, you end up with things like this. This is an exposed sewer line, and you can see the vent pipe here. That's not good for the sewer line or the stream. Or this was a grass channel leading from this apartment complex in Blacksburg. So not only do you have all of this erosion occurring and that the channel's widening, but also all of what was here in terms of sediment is now in the stream behind me when I was taking this picture, and that stream has a sediment TMDL. And so I like to say, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. So either we pay for or require the land developers to pay for stormwater management, or we as the citizens pay to fix our infrastructure or restore the ecosystem services that are lost due to the damage caused by stormwater. Okay, so stormwater management is really, really important. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so the basic question of this research is, how can we develop land and protect our streams from physical degradation? So I'm not going to address water quality, just physical degradation. And so the first question, and I'll explain what unified stormwater sizing criteria are, does this method of designing stormwater infrastructure actually protect channel stability? And so we looked at that with current climate, and then we projected it with future climate. And then a follow-up question is, can we tweak? I'll give you a little teaser here is no, it doesn't protect channel stability. So then how do we tweak the stormwater regulations or adjust them so that they do? So that's what we're going to talk about. But first, this will be very exciting, a brief Maryland stormwater history, just to give you some ideas. And first of all, shout out to Stu Comstock with Maryland Department of the Environment, because he was the one who set me straight. So before most of you were born, 1984, not all of you, but most of you, there were no statewide stormwater regulations. There were regulations in individual municipalities, okay, but they largely focused on flood control. Then before many of you were born, so 1984 to 2000, there were statewide regulations, but they focused only on controlling peak flows, and typically for what we call from the 2-year recurrence interval storm event and the 10-year recurrence interval storm event. There were some local regulations to treat runoff from the first ½ inch of rainfall for water quality, but that was somewhat the runoff from the first half. So you'll notice that I'm saying the runoff from a given storm event. That will be important later. Okay, and then in 2000, there was a huge cultural change in stormwater management in Maryland, and Maryland really led the country in stormwater management. And this 2000 change was called Unified Storm Sizing Criteria, and it recognized the fact that you cannot that controlling simply the peak flows, the high flows, is not going to protect your channels. It will protect against some flooding, but it was not only the high flows, but just simply the volume of runoff that was degrading stream channels. And so these became more volume focused, okay? And while there are a lot of details in the regulations from 2000, the two main volumes were the water quality volume. Okay, so this is based on the idea of capturing that first flush, that first amount of runoff. Okay, so you had to have enough volume storage to capture and treat runoff from the first inch of rainfall. So that was one volume. And then there's the channel protection volume. And that says you need to detain the runoff from a 1-year, 24-hour rainfall event. Okay, so these are design storms that we use as engineers. And so in the part of Maryland, we were working, I think that was 2.8 inches over 24 hours, was the rainfall event. Okay. And then in 2008, what is currently the regulation is what is called environmental site design. And so it kept many of the aspects of the unified stormwater sizing criteria. It added and emphasized better site planning. So cluster the development, stay out of the riparian areas and preserve them. And it really required the use of what we call low impact development, the infiltration based practices distributed throughout the watershed instead of these giant ponds at the downstream end as the only control. And it tweaked the method for calculating storage. So now there's actually less storage than required originally. Okay, so there's a reason I went into all this, and that will come up in the research a little bit more before we talk research. Okay, so I know many of you probably have taken Dr. Miller's class, and you understand that coarse sediment is not a problem so much for streams, but in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, when you start talking sediment, the first thing people think of is that it's pollutant. So just a reminder that in this seminar, sediment is not a bad thing. Of course, we'll be talking about coarse sediment and channel stability because coarse sediment is really what is the primary influence on your channel stability. Okay. Another thing, if you want to see a bunch of fluvial geomorphologists argue about something, or stream people in general, just ask them to define stream stability. Okay, so for the sake of this talk, we won't be going there. But something to keep in mind is the Mid-Atlantic has had a long history of land use, land cover change. Okay, so first European settlers arrived, they denuded the landscape, there was widespread erosion that then resulted in widespread sedimentation in the floodplains, which we refer to as legacy sediments. And then there's been urbanization, so we increased the runoff and increased the amount of sediment that water would move and carry off the landscape. And so we have ended up with stream channels that look like this. Okay? And this is actually from the city of Roanoke. I'm going to assume that this was not constructed this way. And so we're looking at a small unnamed tributary that has widened many, many feet and has incised. And so for the sake of this talk, when I say stability, I'm going to mean that the channel is not degrading, it's not widening, it's not deepening from its current state. Now, whether the original state was stable or not, we're not going to go there. We'll just say that it's not degrading. Okay. So, okay. Another assumption, the stormwater regulations assume that the 1-year, 24-hour rainfall event produces the 1-year recurrence interval flood. Okay, from the folks in the room, give me a thumbs up if you agree with this. I'm getting a thumbs down. Very good. That is not a good assumption, but we assume that for stormwater regulations to make engineering design easier. And this goes back decades. Okay, and we'll talk about that later too. In fact, when you have a 1-year, 24-hour storm event and you dump 2.86 inches of water onto a watershed, depending on the conditions in the watershed, obviously you all know this, but just a reminder, you could get a 5-year flood. If it's say like today, when we've had, first of all, it's the end of winter, the watershed is completely saturated, and we've had rainfall. So anything that hits the ground now is going to run off, right? Or if it's the end of summer, you could get a minor storm event simply because the watershed is dry and there's plenty of storage. Okay. But we don't acknowledge that in stormwater design. And we just assume that if we rain this amount, this much, we're gonna have the same recurrence interval flood, when in fact, those two data sets are completely different. They have nothing to do with each other. So keep that in mind too. Okay. Last thing I promised before we start research is all models are wrong. Okay, they're simplifications of reality, but some are useful. Okay, they let us ask what if questions. They let us project into the future. They allow us to evaluate questions that have a very long temporal scale or a very large spatial scale, where we could not experiment in the real world, or we do not want to wait 30 years to actually get the data and the results. Okay, but they are wrong. We do adjust the model to match observed conditions. We call that calibration. So we try to get it as close as possible. And hopefully we're also applying some common sense as to how the system works based on our own observation. But I do like to point out that all models are wrong. Okay, we'll talk research now. So where we are working has a great name, Tributary 109, which we affectionately refer to as Trib 109. It's a tributary to Little Seneca Creek in Clarksburg, Maryland. This is in what was called a special protection area. These are cool water streams. So this is the watershed in 2005. It was just starting to undergo development. And the USGS in Montgomery County started monitoring, which was awesome. This is a wonderful data set. So there are other watersheds. There's a controlled watershed, Sober Branch. There's a couple other watersheds involved in this. But Trib 109, about a third of a square mile. It's about 44% total impervious area. Now, I'll show you a picture from this is the current existing situation. So it developed over a period of years. There's a USGS stream gauge, there's a rain gauge. Montgomery County has collected cross-section data, longitudinal profiles, pebble counts, and there are multiple LiDAR sets. Some of Dr. Matt Miller's graduate students have worked up in this watershed. So this was developed under the unified storm sizing criteria, so the water quality volume and the channel protection volume. It also incorporates some aspects of environmental site design, such as this is the stream here, and you will notice they stayed out of the riparian area. They clustered development, and we'll look at the stormwater in a minute. Okay, so let me decipher this. So this stormwater system consists of, we didn't actually represent all of them, but it's over 70 stormwater controls in a third of a square mile. So this is high density. The light tan lines are actually subwatersheds in our swim model, our watershed model. And so in places, because the stormwater controlled runoff from a single roof, we have subwatersheds that are a roof. Okay, so that's how dense this is. So this is the main stem of the tributary. This is the reach we modeled for channel stability. The three sites, there's 1, 2, 3, the green symbols are where the county has monitored cross sections and pebble counts since 2004, I think were the first ones. Okay. So there's distributed stormwater management throughout these areas. So microbial retention, infiltration trenches. So the blue is underground storage. You can see the blue dots. The purple are infiltration trenches. Green are your bioretention cells. Okay, and then at the end of each of these kind of small, there are 4 small subwatersheds, there's a pond. And so these are like the pond that we saw, except that it has a little pool of water. It's called extended detention. So there's both the distributed stormwater management, which we would consider kind of low impact development, environmental site design. And then there's the traditional end of pipe storage pond. Okay, so it has aspects of both the new ideas in stormwater management and the old. And so what we did was we built this swim model, and then we used it to pull out stormwater management and see what the effect would be. And so we broke it into the existing conditions, and then everything that was not a pond, we called the distributed stormwater. Okay, so these are small practices throughout the watershed, and then the ponds, and then we took all the stormwater management out just to see what would happen. Okay, so we'll look at those comparisons. So just to give you an idea what we're working with, this is the channel. Here is the USGS gauge, right here. We, on the downstream end, this is the cross-section following most of the development being completed. Okay, so fairly stable. This is a good lesson for all graduate students to plot your data before you release it. This is an oops right there. But what we can see from the channel is there's sediment moving through it and the elevations are bouncing around, but it's basically stable in this cross-section. This cross-section, which is a pool, is not. Okay, so what we're seeing, so 2016 is the black line. We're getting about a foot of degradation in 4 years. Okay, and this is kind of classic bank erosion. It's going to start to fail. This is going to slough in. So in this particular section, the pools are actually starting to deepen. And having walked the section, the ripples are getting shorter and steeper, which is a sign that it's going to start to unravel. So when we think about channel stability, it's really a two-part problem. There's the water, and how much water is flowing, how high does it get, and then there's the sediment aspect, the sediment in the channel. And so we paired two models. So one was a watershed model, it's EPA stormwater management model, and then the Corps of Engineers HEC-RAS to look at sediment transport through the reach. For the SWIM model, this shows all the different nodes in the model. We got the watershed characteristics and the stormwater infrastructure. We had what are called as-built plans. So those are the design plans based on how it was actually constructed. And we use that to put in the stormwater best management practices or stormwater controls into the model. We calibrated the SWIM model to flow at the USGS gauging station. And then, as I said before, we use the calibrated models to explore how the stormwater management affected runoff from this watershed. So there was the existing conditions, just the ponds. If we took out the distributed stormwater management, just the distributed stormwater management, if we took out the ponds, and then no stormwater management. And then we did a follow-up simulation with existing conditions in response to 64 different climate change scenarios. And Tetra Tech provided us with the rainfall data from the downscale climate simulations. So we've been busy. Okay. Then, so SWIM was used to generate the hydrograph, the runoff time series, and we use that as an input into a HEC-RAS model. So the HEC-RAS model, we developed, it's what's called a quasi-unsteady. You take your hydrograph and you break it into chunks of steady flow. And we did that because this watershed, the hydrographs are so flashy, the stream goes up and comes down, that the model was pretty unstable, particularly under climate change scenarios. So we had to go to the quasi-unsteady, and it's a one-dimensional model. And so we used LiDAR data and the cross sections the county measured to create the channel geometry. And we also used the bed surface particle counts, bulk sediment sample, and USGS suspended sediment data from some gauges in Fairfax. So that was the closest suspended sediment monitoring data we could find, but those are also urban watersheds. And we use those to parameterize all the sediment transport routines. And then calibrated HEC-RAS to the USGS, the flow data and the water surface elevation. And then also we were trying to calibrate the model by matching the observed channel change because we didn't actually have measured sediment data other than what the particle sizes were. And then we took the flows from the SWIM model and all the different scenarios and put them into HEC-RAS and let it go to see what would happen. Okay. So let's look at the results. So first, we're going to look at hydrology from SWIM, and I'm going to walk you through this. So this is, we compared runoff from Trib 109 under these different scenarios to Soper Branch, which is a forested controlled watershed. So the big maroon bars are the largest, by what percentage did the flows from Trib 109 increase as compared to a forested control? And so following development, even with all of the stormwater management, the largest flood from each year, the average flood, the average of all the peak flows from those years, 15 years of data, nearly doubled or doubled on average. Okay, so even with the stormwater management, we're not replicating a forested condition. If you take out the distributed stormwater management, you get about the same response just from having the ponds. So those large storage ponds are doing the most to control the high flows. The distributed stormwater management, because it's such small volumes, is not very effective at controlling the really large floods. And that's not a surprising result. And then no stormwater management obviously is much worse. So that's the high flows. Let's look at the volume of stormwater management, or volume of stormwater that ran off this watershed. And again, this is from the model and inputting 15 years of measured rainfall data. So with all of the stormwater management, there was like maybe a 7% increase in runoff volume as compared to the forested control. So it did a good job of maintaining the overall runoff volume. The majority of that work was from the distributed BMPs. So there's small BMPs or stormwater controls throughout the watershed, although the ponds certainly helped as well. So that's the volume. The last thing are the kind of orange-yellow bars. That's the increase in the 1-year recurrence interval flow. And for that, we have to look at the right axis. And so this is the percent change from the, as compared to forested control. And this is in percent. So with all of the stormwater management, we had, switch scales, it was about 7 times the 1-year recurrence interval flood. So high probability that you're going to see this flow every year. It's about 7 times higher. Now, this is what we're supposed to be controlling for, and it's 7 times higher. The ponds, again, play the biggest role in reducing these the high flows, but it was with just the ponds, it's about 8 times higher. With the distributed, you're looking at about 18 times higher, and no stormwater management, it's almost 30 times higher. So this is a very frequent storm or flood flow that we see in the channels. And because of urbanization, the best we can do is just decrease the increase to 7 times, generally speaking. Okay, so we're not really actually controlling these more common storm events with the way the stormwater management is designed as per the unified storm sizing criteria. Okay. So that's the hydrology. What does this mean in terms of channel stability? Okay. So I'm going to walk you through this. This is HEC-RAS results. And so the y-axis is the elevation of the channel bed, and the x-axis is what's called river station. So this is HEC-RAS speak, and you start at the downstream end of your model with 0. So that's at this confluence with another tributary, and you count literally the distance in feet upstream onto your upstream end, and those are called river stations. And so the downstream end is a confluence, the upstream end is Snowden Farm Parkway. Okay, so we modeled a roughly a little over 2,000 foot reach of the stream system. The black line is the bottom of the channel, or the longitudinal profile, when we started the model. The purple line, we actually we extended the simulation. We basically took the precipitation time series that was measured and added it on to make it 30 years long instead of 15, so that we could compare it to the climate change option. So the purple line is what happened, what we anticipate the stream channel bottom, where that elevation would be in 30 years. with current climate, and then the blue line after 59 years. So the way you interpret this is when the end of simulation is above the initial bed elevation, you're having aggradation. I'll talk about why there's aggradation there. Where the projected stream bed elevation is below, you're getting degradation or erosion of the channel bed. And in the model, you can set depth to bedrock. So bedrock, you assume that in our lifetimes, it's not really going to erode past that point. And so we set it at 3 feet based on geologic maps of the area. And so what's going on, moving downstream to upstream, actually, let's go upstream to downstream. In the upstream end, you're getting channel erosion. And what we see is because the peak flows are higher than pre-development, that post-development sediment that was largely immobile, and there are large cobbles and small boulders in the stream, it's getting mobilized, okay, when it wasn't very mobile before. And it moves until it reaches a choke point. And in this part of the stream, the channel narrows just downstream of here. You get what we call backwater or ponding during a flood event, and all the coarse sediment drops out, the really coarse sediment. And so we're getting aggradation here, basically a ripple forming. But then downstream of that, there's degradation. This is actually what we call a nick point. So the channel is eroding to the bedrock, and that erosion is moving upstream, which we classically see. So you're seeing steps. It's projected that you're going to see kind of steps in the channel, which is actually what we saw in my bank run Monday. Okay. So the bottom line is using unified storm siting criteria and actually environmental site design, which is the current regulations, because they're similar and actually you're storing less water with environmental site design, is not going to protect channel stability long-term, is the answer to the first question. However, it's better than not having stormwater management, which is the red line. So you see further additional degradation, and just the ponds and just the distributed stormwater alone do not do as well as the combination. Okay. So having this stormwater management and this combination of the distributed to control the flow volume and the ponds to control your really high peak flows is good. It's just not getting us all the way there. Now, climate change. So we ran actually 128 different scenarios because we looked at if the sediment supply became exhausted from the watershed, and it didn't. So the gray band is the full range of all the climate change scenarios. And so as you can tell, the range of aggradation and degradation in the channel increases with climate change because your really high flows are becoming higher. Okay. And just to illustrate, let's see, the red line is the most extreme, had the most high flows of the climate change scenario. You're seeing degradation to bedrock in several places. And then the mildest is the green. Okay. So not quite as, so you're still seeing sort of pretty significant degradation, even with the least extreme of the climate change models. Okay, so what do we do now? So, like I said, channel stability is a two-part problem. Our stormwater regulations only address the water side. We pay no attention whatsoever to sediment. And I shouldn't say that, that's not entirely true. We make some assumptions about what we call the channel forming discharge. And that channel forming discharge can be approximated by 1 to 2 year recurrence interval flow. And that the 1 to 2 year recurrence interval flow can be approximated by the runoff from a 1 to 2 year recurrence interval storm event. So we make several theoretical leaps to get to controlling sediment. And so we're showing that isn't actually going to protect the channel stability. And we see this out in the field all the time. So what we looked at is actually explicitly, rather than through assumptions, considering sediment transport in designing stormwater management. So there were two options we looked at. One is called erosion potential. And this is literally what is the total mass transported over a given duration of time? And so this would be considering, so if you want to think about it as pre-development, how many truckloads of sediment have moved down the channel in 30 years would need to be the same post-development. So we could do a continuous simulation with 30 years of rainfall data and modeling the watershed, or you could just simply look at design storms. And so Sammy looked at design storms. So for the 1 year, the 2 year, the 5 year, up to the 50-year recurrence interval storms, design storms, balancing that sediment or trying to affect the hydrographs such that the total amount of sediment moved after development was the same as what it was before development. So we call that erosion potential. So that's one option we looked at. The other option is actually used in Santa Clara, California. And so the idea behind this is you maintain the total amount of what we call excess shear. And so that comes from, for a given duration, as with the erosion potential. So we talk about excess shear as tau being the shear stress applied by the water to the bed. The critical shear stress is the shear stress required to move a specific size particle. So it could be your median particle size, your D50, it could be your D84. You need to decide that. And this is something that you can calculate as well, either based on continuous simulation or for individual design storms. So Sammy adjusted the stormwater management in the watershed. Typically, it was reducing the outflow, the size of the outflow structure. And so what that looks like for a 1 year, 24-hour design storm. The existing condition hydrograph is very peaky. The green is pre-development. And so assuming that, say, our critical shear stress occurs at what, 30 or 27 CFS, for the excess shear stress way of designing, that would be the black line. So the area under the black line above our critical level is the same as under the green line. So the total duration that we have this excess shear is ultimately the same. It's a combination of time and magnitude. With the erosion potential, because you're literally looking at the total mass of sediment, you actually have to reduce the peak flow below pre-development because you have more volume of runoff. And you have to release that additional volume at a low enough discharge that you're not moving sediment. And so you're extending your hydrograph. So running this through HEC-RAS, the erosion potential for this particular, I mean, this is a case study because it's at one watershed. The erosion potential performed the best. Under current climate, we didn't run it. I think we did run it for climate change. So blue is existing stormwater regulations, purple is the shear stress, and green is the erosion potential. So there's still some degradation, but it's not nearly as extensive. And again, these are model predictions, so they're not perfect either. Okay, and then this is with climate change. So again, the erosion potential, there is some degradation, but it's not nearly as extensive as under the current stormwater regulation. Okay, so to wrap it up, design storms, such as your 1 year, 24-hour storm, does not translate directly to the watershed response. We really need to look at continuous simulation. The infiltration practices do minimize annual runoff, but they don't do much to protect against increases in the peak flows. Conversely, the stormwater ponds do a good job with peak flows, but not as well with controlling stormwater volume. Okay, so really, the combination of them both is needed. And so the unified storm sizing criteria and environmental site design are better than traditional conventional stormwater management where we just built a giant pond at the end of the watershed. But it's still not achieving the goal of the regulations, which is to protect channel stability. It's only going to get worse with climate change just because we're going to have more intense rainfall events. And so to protect channel stability, we need to think about the channel and the sediment that is there. So it's going to be very site dependent. And of the two potential solutions, we looked at erosion potential as the target for the design. So as an engineer, I think about, well, what are specific design criteria we need to meet in our designs? That shows the most promise. And interesting, Sammy's last bit of work, which is literally just came in my inbox yesterday, so I won't show it to you, but it shows that because many of our stream channels are not stable and have legacy sediments and maybe already incised to a certain extent or have been straightened, they're already impacted. If we can have floodplain reconnection in combination with stormwater control, that may produce the kind of the optimal solution to minimizing the impacts of urbanization. Okay, so lowering the bank height, getting the water out onto the floodplain, but first also having stormwater control up in the watershed. So the combination of both may be actually the optimal solution. Okay, but that's still to come. I haven't read what he's done so far, but I only got a little teaser during our group meeting. Results are coming soon. So I wanted to point out a couple of last things to think about in terms of our recommendation. So this is most of the stormwater management design, the runoff calculations are from the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. This is actually a graph that was used to develop the equation for lag time. And it was developed in the 1940s and 50s when we didn't have computers that most people could use. We didn't have calculators, we had slide rules. And so the methods that we are currently using were designed to be easy to calculate by hand. And we forget. Right? We've come a long way. And even when the initial stormwater regulations were put together, this was our computing power. We now consider this a doorstop, right? Your phones do far more than this. And so even the existing stormwater regulations were designed to be simple to calculate. Okay. However, so that kind of leads us to, things have changed. We have much greater computer power. We have extensive precipitation records. Why don't we use continuous time series of rainfall that's actually been measured to design stormwater management practices? Also, we need to start thinking at the watershed scale, not just the site scale. In Virginia, there's this law, it's a loophole in the stormwater laws called the 1% rule. If you're only developing 1% of the watershed, you don't need any stormwater management. So the clever developers, particularly for apartment complexes, build one building at a time. And they have no stormwater management. That one picture of the giant gully, that was from such development. So we need to think about what are the cumulative impacts of development in these small watersheds, because you could not affect the runoff peaks or volume at all, but if you just change the hydrograph timing of when the flood peak arrives from here and here, you can cause massive flooding and erosion just by changing timing. Like, we need to think about this together. And we need to base our stormwater design criteria based on channel stability. So we're recommending erosion potential, but we need to start thinking about the sediment that's out there. And also consider a combination of stormwater management in the watershed, but also if the channel is already inside, if the receiving stream is already inside, consider floodplain reconnection, also looking at the channel itself, because that affects the applied shear stress, is that channel cross-section and flow. And this could just be coded into software. So usually when you start talking about more complicated designs, as an engineer, we all freak out and say, oh, it's going to be more work. This is an example of software. I was one of the people that on this team that put this together. This is to do water balances for constructed wetlands. All of the rainfall data is automatically downloaded from NOAA, and the soils data are already in there, and you can create hydrographs in your wetland. And so this is basically a GUI sitting on top of a groundwater model. We could do something very similar for designing stormwater. And actually, the state of Washington has its own software package that engineers use to design stormwater management. They actually they have them match the flow duration curve. Okay, so another technique. So this can be done. So with that, any questions?
Thanks. So we're only have a few minutes for questions because there's another class coming in here at 1. But Tess, I'll let you pick whose question to answer.
Are you gonna go out and look at for stormwater ponds? Actually, you guys have a great
They're all over the campus.
great bioretention cell.
Yeah, one of our students is actually studying the ponds on campus.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a more elementary type
Yeah.
question, because I'm not really in the stormwater management. But when you mentioned different stormwater system inclusions other than the ponds, so the microbiome retention, the infiltration trenches, sand filters, and the underground storage facilities,
Mhm.
what do those look like?
Oh, I wish I had pictures. So underground storage, you're not gonna see it. Basically a plastic tank that gets buried and water comes in and the outflow is typically at the top of the tank and there's a small orifice or hole that it flows out of. So it allows you to store some. Matter of fact, isn't it in the Anacostia watershed in DC where they have the huge underground storage that's massive? Sand filter is like a giant playground. And so you get infiltration through the soil and it looks like a playground because you just see the sand. An infiltration trench is you literally dig out a trench and you fill it with gravel that's very porous. So it provides storage and allows water to infiltrate every time. So it's kind of like underground storage, but with rock. That's how. Yep. And we left out the tree boxes, which is, it looks like a street tree, but there's actually an inlet that lets the water flow into the root zone. And then there's a pipe that leads out to the stormwater piping system. So we didn't, there were probably 70 of those in the watershed. We did not model those.
Stu.
Sure. Really great work, but my sense is that, in these systems, variability is always the rule. And USGS has this great database of daily suspended sediment records. On the northwest branch of Anacostia, for example, 90% of the annual sediment load gets transported in 5% of the record.
Yeah.
The other 95% of the days don't matter, no matter how you model it. So I was just curious on your impression, appreciating how much work it takes to do this on such a small scale watershed. What's your impression of how generalizable these results are in terms of guiding agencies to regulation?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it can be done. I don't think it's so in other words, extrapolating it beyond trip 109. Okay. I think it's completely feasible just because it's going to depend on, although the key will be the sand bed systems because they're so erodible, but because it is focused, it's site specific. So you have to go out and measure your stream channel and the sediment in it to evaluate the response. But it will be a big change from how stormwater management is designed. I would like to see a study in a coastal plain stream. And actually, I'm working with some Brock Regai from Virginia DEQ. We're trying to get something similar set up for a coastal plain stream.
And I ask all this, for the Chesapeake Bay Trust, there's this unshakable belief that if we just go out and get the right people to collect the right data, then we'll have the right answer. And all the uncertainty will drop in and we'll know what to do. And,
It's not going to be perfect. And Andy and I were actually discussing that so much of what you see in stream channels is like variability. A tree falls in here. Okay, that's going to change that. But I think it's a step forward.
oh, no,
So, yeah. And of course, anytime you start talking policy, that's its own scientific field in and of itself. Okay, so this is kind of the science saying, hello, if you want to protect channel stability, think about the stream channel and the sediment in it. Then it goes into the sausage making, that would be policy. So, because of course your stormwater management affects development, which affects the economy and vice versa, those two. There's feedback loops there, so.
So maybe one last question, but I'm going to start taking down this stuff so we can get out of here quickly when the class comes in. I will stop the recording.
Anything else?
Anybody got a last question?
Thank you.
I do. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, yes, we can.
Hi. So this is Chris Zig from State Highway, also UMBC alum. Hello, everyone. Wanted to, so Tess, you presented this at the pool monitoring forum, which was really cool. And one of our big takeaways was that channels kind of implicitly will become distable over time, regardless of stormwater treatment, but you can sort of create these nested stormwater treatment chains to reduce that over time. That sort of was our big takeaway. So I just interested if you think that's a reasonable takeaway, and also two, whether given the fact that so many large agencies are implementing outfall stabilization at large scale everywhere, do you think that is a intelligent move if it is done so in the absence of upland treatment trains?
Oh, boy. Okay, so the first one, I think, okay, so under current stormwater regulations, the channels will likely start to destabilize. I think the answer to that is yes. And I think people are seeing that already. Because there are a lot of assumptions that have kind of gone into those regulations that don't necessarily hold. I think you really have to look at the channel that is the receiving body and how susceptible that is to erosion. And coastal plain streams are just really, really sensitive to changes. So I think under the current stormwater regulations, which are leaps and bounds better than where I've seen a lot of stormwater regulations, but they're still not going to protect channel stability until you start looking. And we won't until we start really thinking about the sediment transport. Now, and then the second, the stormwater outfalls. Well, and first of all, this talk was just the physical integrity of the channel. We did not address water quality at all. And the stormwater outfall protection is only going to affect right there at the outfall. And so then the question is what happens downstream? And so I think there is research coming out of like Australia, primarily Australia, that is showing you actually have to over-treat. So you have to treat more than 100% of the impervious area to protect against both water quality impacts and channel stability impacts. So I think, yes, outfall protection is a good practice because we don't get gullies forming. But yes, I think we do need the work up in the watershed as well. I mean, urbanization has just such a profound effect on hydrology. I don't think there's a quick answer.
So I think
Yeah,
we're going to.
Figured so much. Thank you.
We're going to have, this is a class coming in that wonders what we're doing here. Thanks very much. I would appreciate actually for those of you who were logged in online, if you can send me an email because I don't have time to preserve the list of people who are here. There are 39 people online right now. So yeah, thanks very much. We're going to end the recording now. The room.